Hi, ladies. Welcome to Pathways to Fertility, a YouTube station dedicated to the women who are on the hardcore journey to improve their egg quality, their overall well-being, to have the baby of their dreams. I am Samantha Jacobs. I'm a licensed acupuncturist and fertility coach in Connecticut and New York. And I have been helping women for 20 plus years conceive their babies. Today, I am back for another video on a topic that I am particularly passionate about. I find myself seeing a lot of these components in my practice when I read this article, which is very long, very in-depth. I'm going to put a link to the article in the show notes. That basically, I was like, I have to make a video on this because this is quite powerful information. This is, right, first, it will empower you to know you are not alone. Many of my patients are like, am I nuts that the stress is making my fertility worse? No, you're not nuts. And third of all, most importantly, it is something you can work on, that you can change your life and who you are and how you react to life circumstances. And it's something you can bring into your life to improve your fertility. And in a nutshell, this article clearly states anxiety and depression is often tied to common fertility diagnoses in Western medicine. POI, right, premature ovarian insufficiency, low AMH, high FSH, functional hypothalamic amenorrhea, and PCOS. These particular diagnoses can be tied to stress and anxiety, and in particular, like PCOS, there is often a loop where PCOS causes hormonal and metabolic changes in the woman that increases her chances of anxiety and depression. Anxiety and depression increase the chances of having fertility issues. So you're just one of the quick synopsis, that's the quick synopsis. And that by addressing your stress, figuring it out, digging deep, it can change everything. And you don't necessarily need a fancy supplement or lots of acupuncture, but rather saying how you are interacting with your life. Going into this particular article, I thought it amazing information. I will say that some of the research articles they used were on animals. There is not a lot of good research on women and stress. And that currently it's not a well-discussed nor researched topic. And Western medicine has to lean into animal studies to bring the information forward. So hopefully, as time passes, we will get better quality research that will help women figure out what they need to do in their lives to help to improve their fertility. It has been acknowledged that stress is a key factor. Stress impacts the advancement and the onset of ovarian damage. Stress on the ovaries and the hormones, decreasing the ovaries' ability to function correctly and changing egg quality. Psychological stress leads to ovarian dysfunction. I have had over all these years, many women who have come to me and they have stopped menstruating for several months because of some kind of stressor going on in their life. Maybe the passing of a parent, their spouse being sick. that they've lost their job. So you can clearly see something happens in the woman's life, and her body reacts to the amount of stress that she is experiencing by shutting down. The article indicates women who experience high levels of stress during IVF have less eggs to retrieve, lower fertilization rates, poor embryo quality, lower pregnancy rates. I have seen a lot of variance in my years of practice. Where I have seen a commonality are women who have chronic, ongoing anxiety, usually onsetting in the teenage years. And here we are, flash forward, they're trying to conceive, and the stress is building, and their natural tendency is to become anxious or depressed. Now, mental stress has been found to lower AMH levels and decrease androgen follicle count. From a Western perspective, usually AMH has an indication that egg quality has been impacted. We are seeing thus then mental stress lowers AMH, and it also has the potential to lower egg quality. Mental stress has been found to increase the risk in women, POI, that's premature ovarian insufficiency. It increases the rate of functional hypothalamic amenorrhea, FHA, and PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. And those three elements, POI, FHA, and PCOS, lead to hormonal imbalances that increase the incidency of depression. The risk of depression occurs. It also increases the amount of stress she's experiencing. So these three particular diagnoses have a secular effect. The stress that they create in the body creates emotional stress, and that emotional stress enhances the internal hormonal dysfunction. Stress also leads to nervous system changes, which can decrease egg quality. Stress can also create metabolic disorders, which increase weight, insulin issues, which impact egg quality. If there's any single woman out there that hasn't had the experience of being incredibly stressed, wanting to eat terrible food. I mean, gosh, I don't think there's anything more satisfying than potato chips, cheese, nachos, boozy drinks. So stress has us leaning into eating bad things. And of course, then, we put on weight. And generally, we are putting that weight around our bellies and on our hips. And that's the type of weight that leads to a lot of inflammation. It also leads to all sorts of insulin dysregulation. These components can impact egg quality. My perspective on this, before we go any farther, that stress is unrecognized component of infertility. I see in my practice over and over again the huge amount of stress, this roller coaster ride, right? The best analogy I've seen is, doing an IVF cycle is like running a marathon. And that it's tiring. It requires yourself to force yourself to get through it to the finish line. This type of stress is tremendous. And Western medicine, because they can't really treat it or do much about it, gets discounted. So when I see this article, I think it's really empowering. Looking at this section, we can see stress causes ovarian dysfunction. In the article, they mention daily stress leads to decreased reproductive hormones. We can acknowledge not only can stress be something major, very traumatic, but it can be the daily grind of a stressful job, juggling a lot of components in your life, financial worries, the daily grind of dealing with a certain amount of stress that never gets any better but doesn't get any worse has an impact on reproductive hormones. It was noted women with depression had a higher incidency of high FSH, high luteinizing hormone levels, lower estrogen, and lower progesterone levels. Women with significant depression were more likely to go into perimenopause early. A woman's ability to manage depression and anxiety has quite a potent effect on her reproductive system. Psychological stress, which decreases ovarian function, was found to enhance the woman's feeling of stress, thus further impairing ovarian function. Once again, we're back to this loop. You have the outside stress, infertility, you feel stressed on the inside, and as you're stressed on the inside, it has the potential to impact your hormones. When you're trying to get pregnant and you see things not working so well, that outside stress, that reflection of your fertility comes back inside. I think this is an important facet to acknowledge because many of my patients are at a higher risk for anxiety and depression and distress. The level of unmanaged distress is quite powerful. And is it this cyclic part going on? I mean, that's part of the work I do with my patients. How do we manage this? How do I help you to figure out how to be the best you can be? The article mentions 40% of the women using IVF had a psychiatric disorder, such as major depression, generalized anxiety, persistent depressive disorders. The article states comparing women undergoing IVF, there were higher rates of mental disorders compared to women not using IVF. I think IVF lends itself, just in a nutshell, to make stress levels off the charts. And I think it can even take a woman who probably has never dealt with really bad anxiety to a new level. So not too sure on that. Because of the challenge to accurately assess stress during IVF, this leads to conflicting research on stress levels impacting IVF outcomes. Basically, I hope they do more research because we need to help women and men who are going through this. We need to support them. Looking at POI, premature ovarian insufficiency. Women who are diagnosed with POI often have emotional components going on in their life, that there's some sort of emotional trauma or chronic levels of high stress, all leading to being a potential trigger as they move into fertility treatments. Ladies, this is an important piece of information. If you have POI and you can acknowledge that you have anxiety, please get some support, help, get a coach, get a therapist, pull everybody in together, because this can be reversible. So by addressing your stress levels and the way you're reacting to your environment, you could greatly change your fertility. 43% of POI women report a history of depression. Their symptoms of depression start as ovarian function starts to fall. And ladies, I will tell you, as a menopausal woman, we don't fully acknowledge in medicine the huge impact hormones have on our moods. We know it, but we don't get a lot of acknowledgement or support around it. So their depression starts to appear as their ovarian function starts to fail. but before being diagnosed with POI. And though more research needs to be done. So this is interesting. If you are experiencing depression out of the blue and you don't understand what's going on and you know you're going to want to do family planning, this might be worth investigating with your gynecologist or with your RE. Next, we have DOR, diminished ovarian reserve. So research has documented young women with high levels of stress have lower androgen follicle counts in an ultrasound. And this suggests women experiencing high levels of stress experience fast androgen follicle count loss. So they're starting to see this correlation in women who have impaired ovarian function and the level of stress that they're experiencing. The researchers noted that environmental stress can cause the androgen follicle count to be higher. And that higher androgen follicle count diminishes eggs, the overall egg pool for later recruitment. And they're thinking that tie-in to being DOR is related to early onset of a high androgen follicle count. Next, we have FHA, which is an absence of menstruation and ovulation. These are anovulatory cycles. The article mentions that FHA is often a combination of emotional stress and metabolic stress. So women with FHA experience low energy, nutritional deficiencies, poor sleep, severe stress, overexertion of physical activities. This is something I have very common in my patients. And it usually presents with a desire of high level of perfection, body perfection, over exercising. It's noted here, FHA women will struggle coping with stress, lean into the idea of perfection, desire constant approval, and over control themselves and their environment. And this is so incredibly common. I think it could be just the New England area that I live, that you need to be fit, thin, well-dressed, a certain amount of makeup. There's a presentation that our area demands from women. When women are stressed, this is something they deeply lean into to keep control of their lives. Now we have PCOS, which is an endocrine disorder involving metabolic and autoimmune problems. I think PCOS for most women, it is a complicated topic. It's got so many layers to address in it. And I think this article kind of glossed over portions of it. I think in PCOS, it is one of the hardest things to try to modify your diet and your stress when your internal body is telling you the complete opposite. Women with PCOS have a higher likelihood of anxiety, mood disorders, including eating disorders. PCOS affects women's body, physical body, hair growth, weight gain, acne, which only enhances a woman's perception of herself, which leads to more stress and an increase in mood disorders. The authors moved on to the rat study portion of this article. There were two key components that I came away with from the it was a long section of the article. These rats have been developed specifically to mimic human reproductive systems under stress. So these rats have been specifically developed to respond to stress and have that stress reflected into their reproductive system. When these rats are stressed, they make less follicles, they make less embryos, and they have less live births. It was found rats, when the stress axis is activated in the rat body, it leads to more aneuploidy embryos. We can clearly see from these rat studies that a stressed rat has less egg quality, leading to embryos with genetic disorders. It was noted rats experienced compromised blood flow to the uterus and to the ovaries, leading to diminished oxygen and nutrient supply to the ovary. And this is crucial, ladies. This is where acupuncture has such tremendous power. This is one of the reasons why acupuncture works so well. We can increase pelvic blood flow. Moving along to the overview in this article, these were my nuggets of gold that I got from reading through. Women with life stressors and susceptible genetic makeup can lead to problems with fertility. The BRCA gene 1 has been clinically found to lower AMH. Women with Fragile X genetic markers have been found to go into perimenopause, menopause early, that their egg quality has been greatly impaired by carrying this genetic marker. This is just the tip of the iceberg. We don't fully understand all of those elements. The way the genetic marker takes away the quality of the fertility gets enhanced by the stress that a woman is experiencing. Elevated levels of cortisol have the potential to disturb key hormones in the reproductive system, creating a subpar ovarian function. Women come to me, they ovulate on day 14, but they don't have a cycle that's longer than 24 days. That their body's ability to create enough progesterone to maintain the cycle is below par, but it's not enough to completely shut the system down. We can see here that key hormones, when they're disturbed, right, we are creating a less than optimal ovarian function. IVF is highly anticipatory, creates anxiety and cortisol levels, increasing cortisol levels, which lead to lower pregnancy rates. Increased perceived mental stress is an independent predictor of increasing FSH levels. Once again, hormones have an impact on our emotions, and if FSH is getting high enough, I do see there's more anxiety in women, and which came first, we don't know, but they often come together. If you have any comments, leave them. If you have any experience that you would love to share with stress, maybe what you saw affecting you and how you changed it, leave a comment. If you like this video, hit like, please, and become my 4th subscriber. And if there's any way I can help you, reach out to me. If you have any interesting ideas for other videos, please post, and I will see you for the next video on stress. Bye.